Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the 9 to 5 Faith podcast. I'm here with one of my new friends, Kemir Baker. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited to be here with you.
I'm so excited. And this has been like months in the making, too, just because life and schedules and all of that stuff. So I'm so happy that we finally get to sit down, we get to have a good conversation, and we get to talk about all the things faith and work and all that good stuff.
Yes.
So
Well, I'm
tell us,
excited.
so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name, as you already said, is Kemir Baker. And about 5 years ago, I started a nonprofit called J Intelligence Networks. And for short, we're J Intel because that is a mouthful. And what we do, we provide educational programs, faith-based educational programs for emotional health and healing, emotional healing as well. And being the founder and the CEO, that's what brought me here today because I can work a lot.
Yeah.
And so I've learned some things in my own walk with God in terms of just discipline so that I'm making sure that I'm connecting with Him in the midst of all that needs to get done. And I would say, as I made that statement, I was like, well, Kemir, your story is not that different. You're a woman. And as a woman, that's what we do. We get the job done.
Yeah.
And sometimes in that process, we kind of overlook ourselves and overlook digging deeper in our walk with God because we just don't have time.
Yeah. So, I have so many questions kind of rolling through my head. So, the first one is when setting up your company, how did you, it's kind of, I guess, a little bit easier because the product is a faith-based product, but how do you in terms of like company culture, we always said hire and fire to your values.
Yeah.
How do you keep Jesus and your Christian values at the forefront of your mind when you're running your business?
Well, it actually is kind of interesting because there are certain things you're not supposed to do by law in
Yeah.
terms of how much you communicate God and things of that nature. And so for myself, I realized that a lot of what we represent, we have to walk it. We
Mm.
can't just say, oh, we represent God in a new and fresh light. Like we have to make sure that we're treating people with love, dignity, and respect. And those attributes, when it come out, a lot of people at times don't have that experience. They may have the experience where their bosses over them, they're being micromanaged, they're not being built up. And so
Mm.
when we can come and present those practices, they know right away that we're different. And then they
Yeah.
feel so like excited. And so then they just work harder because
Mm.
they feel believed in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's been exciting to see because I before my character was, they may say Jesus. If I didn't put him in a sentence, I'm not believing today. and, to, and, to, and to make that adjustment, and because not everyone can receive Christ in that way where it's just in their face. And so I had to learn how to adjust my presentation of him so that he is not only still being seen but approachable.
Mm. Seen but approachable. I'm actually working on some writing right now, and I have like normal but sacred. And I feel
Mm,
like what you just said, like seen but approachable, is like the same exact, like kind of falls into the same dichotomy of the two. Because yeah, like I think that there's this holiness, right? The reverence that we should have for God, but also like Jesus for everyone who
yeah,
accepts him.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, go
And I
ahead.
was gonna say, we know in our journey there were times where we weren't ready to hear him and want to draw closer to him. And
Mhm.
so then it becomes, who are we to be the complete opposite when he met us where we were at and was able to have that conversation with us and slowly bring us to that place where we're like, yeah, I can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think too, like, that not only not that it waters down the gospel, but it helps people understand, like, kind of the context of Jesus and, like, how he works. I know that
Mhm.
sounds, like, really vague, but I'm thinking of, like, the Chosen series, right? Like, I know there's, like, a lot of, like, internal controversy of, like, the legitimacy of it,
Right.
and I think, like, you can argue, theology every day with it. That's fine, that's not what I do. More power to those people who do. But
Sure.
I think that what it has done in a really great way is it has shown both the humanity and holiness of
Mhm.
Jesus, which is a
Yeah.
really beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And when I watched The Chosen, I've seen a couple episodes because what they do is they fill in the gaps of the
Mhm.
possibility of what was that culture like, what could have been.
Mhm.
And when I watch it, I'm like, I never thought about it that way. I never
Yeah,
thought about Matthew doing X, Y, and Z, and someone being exiled from their family. I was like, I never processed that because when you read it so quickly sometimes.
right.
You know, slow down and say, well, wait a minute, how did that decision impact other people around them? And
Mm.
I feel like The Chosen does a good job of showing what that impact looks like.
Oh, yeah. There's a book, that I like to read, it's called What If It's True? And
Mm.
have you read it?
I haven't, but it sounds enticing.
Oh, it's so good, but it's this guy who usually writes fiction,
Mhm.
and it's half memoir, half, like, historical nonfiction, but it's
Mhm.
like what he does is he applies his skills as a fiction writer on top of the Bible and, like,
Oh.
the stories of Jesus.
Mhm.
And so he does it in a book form. The same thing that I see done in The Chosen is, like,
Mhm.
adding a lot of context
Mhm.
to different stories, like, the birth of Jesus. Well, like, we just know, like, hey, Mary didn't have room at the inn, so she gave birth in a stable. Well, he adds context around it and is like, it's freezing cold. Mary is in pain, like,
Right.
there are animals pooping right next to her, like, because
Yes.
she's in a barn, in
Yes.
essence. So he just adds, like, different context to it. So, yeah, those things like that, I always recommend those to people because as a good starting point, especially when they're getting to know the Bible.
Yeah, that totally makes sense because it hits your heart in a different way.
Mhm. I think we're able to see it,
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're just able to see it in a way that makes more sense.
Mhm.
Anyways, there's a little tidbit about reading the Bible. Um, so in what ways have you used your faith to kind of develop the policies around your work? So, like, whether it is, respecting the Sabbath or, how you even pay your employees or dig into that for me.
Yeah, I think for me, our philosophy is integrity. That's one of our pillars is integrity and showing God in a fresh light.
Mm,
And so there's been many times where the flesh will come in and you want to cut corners and you want to not pay someone as much because you don't have very much money.
mm,
But after a while, you're like, okay, that makes no sense. This
mm,
person has worked really hard. They've demonstrated their value to us. Why am I wanting to cut something that they need? And so those things are what I think brings me back from the flesh, like, okay, will God meet our needs if we give abundantly? And I will say that he does.
mm,
And so that was something that I continue to learn, especially in the first couple of years when we were starting, just in terms of not being so tight-fisted with finances, being responsible, but
Mm,
allowing God to breathe through them and in the process impact people around. And again, as I said before, we really do work on us being a light. And, when they come in, they read our mission, they know what we're about. And so that does add another layer of, okay, well, how are you going to engage with me if I know that this is who you
right,
represent?
right.
Yeah. And we know sometimes Christians get it bad because if you make one mistake, all Christians are terrible.
Yeah.
And so it does put us at a higher standard than most individuals, most companies because of that.
Yeah. I have been able to work for some Christian companies, and they they like to say, Christian companies should be the best run businesses
Mhm, mhm,
because they have that integrity level, but also I think in the way that I mean, business ethics even, right? Like you can go into down that rabbit hole if you want to, of like how you run your business is in an ethical way. And also, um, when it comes to things like, acting against your mission or against your values,
mhm.
we're all human. That's going to happen. But I think the response is so significantly different. And that's what sets Christians apart from,
Yeah,
other people.
yeah. Because I've learned generally, let me learn my lessons so I don't have to keep learning the same lesson.
Yeah.
And God will place you back in a circumstance to continue to purify.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, let me get that the first time. Make my life a little bit easier.
Take the pain away.
you know and then after you're done with the frustration and you really ponder over it, you're like, wait a minute, this was self-induced because I knew better, but this was the route that I took, so I can't get mad at God. I need to take responsibility for my actions.
Mm. And then one thing God has been teaching me, I've just started like my own garden in my backyard. And one thing that he really has been teaching me is what you were saying earlier of him providing.
Mhm.
And one thing that I'm learning is he will give you just enough.
Exactly.
I feel like you have a story about that and I want to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, you want abundance,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, because I state that we're because nonprofit, of course, apply for grants, and there was one grant that I applied for, and I was like, I put in for the max. I was like, okay,
Mm,
I can't wait because these
mm,
are all the things that we need to get through, and I think that what we were awarded was a fraction. I
mm-hmm,
think it was 1% of the request. And I was like, okay. But on the flip side, that organization receives so many requests because there are not a lot of loopholes that you have to go through.
mm-hmm.
And so then once you start thinking, I was like, wait a minute, we actually did really well to get a response.
Mm, yeah.
We did well to get a response that quickly. And even though it was 1%, it could have been nothing.
Right.
And we used it, of course, but would it be great to have gotten the abundance?
Right.
And so it is all God's timing.
Yeah. And I think just his provision, I just think about I mean, it's one of my favorite stories because I mean, all the Bible stories where I'm like, I wouldn't do that. And I'm like, yeah, you would. Like, that would definitely be you.
Yeah.
But, when the Israelites are in the desert and God provides them with manna and he says, don't keep it. Like, you have to trust me that we're going to still provide.
Yeah.
And those who kept it, it went rotten and spoiled within a day,
Yeah.
and it didn't last. And so just that absolution of like God giving us just what we need when we need it, when
Yes.
we ask.
Yes. And he's a right on time God, but
Yeah.
he's not a before God. like, God, I'll be less anxious if you wanted to do it before.
Yes, that too. But also, do not worry, for I am with
Yeah,
you.
exactly.
There's also that element. And that's been I liked I this takes me all the way back to like my childhood when we
Mhm.
would like um sing the verse like thy lamp is a guide to my feet and a light into my path, or I'm butchering it right
Yes.
now, but and I heard a sermon one time and it was like it's a lamp. It's not a floodlight, it's not the sunshine, it is a lamp. How far ahead can you see with a lamp? Not very far.
Right.
God
Yes.
gives you a lamp for he shows you what is right in front of you, not down the line.
Right. Yeah. That's so
I
true.
I always liked that because I'm like, yeah, that's true. Like as much as we hate it, but I mean the the ability that we have to surrender that to God, it's our wanting to cling to it is just our attempt at control.
Yeah, it's our version of security.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
really our security should just be in Jesus.
Yeah. And that's what he says, and that's why it's a constant wrestle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the tension there.
So tell me a little bit about you're developing a faith-based product. Um, obviously, you are living out those principles in your work. But what I hear from a lot of my friends who have worked in ministry
Mhm.
is that um it can become a little bit, I guess, numbing
Hmm.
in essence. So like for example, say I don't to correct me if this is a poor example, but like you're
Yeah.
writing a curriculum and
Mhm.
you're spending time in the word writing this curriculum based off of what you said. You just count that as your time spent with Jesus.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't work for me. I had
I
to
don't
I
think it
had
works
to
for anyone.
Yeah, I learned the hard way. Like God, he interrupts me. Like he is very devoted to us having time together.
Mm,
And so if I'm not putting my time in with him, I start going crazy. I've just learned
yeah.
that. Emotionally, I'm all over the place. My faith is all over the place. And even when I'm home with my family, because there's so many different levels of responsibility when you're in your family, and
Mhm.
you have less time because there's so many needs, that's the temptation to, okay, I'm gonna meet those needs and then I'll do God later. And then later becomes, the next day. And then it's
Right.
barely the next day. And then it keeps going. And, but when I'm in that phase, that stage, I'm not right.
Right.
I'm more hostile towards people. I'm short tempered. Everything is about me. It's about
Mm,
me, my needs, because I'm not looking through the lens of him and I'm not being strengthened by him. And so that was something he taught me in the beginning for the nonprofit. And it's been great because it spared me from more hurt because he is very deliberate in wanting to spend time with me. And now I can take pride in that in a sense of, wow, you love me that much. You want this much time? Okay. You got all these other things you could be doing. You got all these other people going on in the
yeah.
world, all this chaos, but you're that deliberate and want to time with me. Okay. Who am I to turn down the creator of the world?
That's beautiful. I have never considered that before.
Mhm.
Of like, he gets to spend time with us and he chooses to spend time with us.
Yeah, and very deliberate with it,
Yeah.
and so loving and so kind. And for me, he had to transform or change my perspective to be able to see the loving kindness because of the previous messages that I had ingrained in terms of you got to be X, Y, and Z.
Mm,
Even to approach him, your stuff got to be perfect.
right.
And that's not his character, that's not his perspective. And
Right.
so once I was able to remove that faulty lens, that foggy lens, and put that lens in of through, he says it all the time in his word, and actually start believing that yes, I'm wonderfully formed. Yes, I will do anything the impossible. Like, are you giving me these things?
Yeah.
And once that started being implanted in my spirit, then it became, oh, why wouldn't I want to spend time with you?
Yeah. One thing that I am learning too, I'm going through this book on prayer, and it was like, do you go to God about everything in
Mhm.
prayer?
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
Like, and that asked me a really hard question of like,
Yeah.
am I even diluting my prayers? Like you were saying earlier, of like, oh, you have to have everything all perfect in order to approach God.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, am I going to him about everything? Because he
Yeah.
already knows. Like, who am I kidding? Like, he already
Yeah.
knows my thoughts. And, but like, why do I think he's so far removed from me that I don't need to be going to him about this stuff?
Yeah, and God just challenged me recently in that. I
Mm.
was praying, crying and praying as I do at times because of my own, like, when is stuff gonna happen?
Yeah.
But when I was praying, it was so clear that gentle whisper was, "You're not asking."
Mm.
And I was like, "Oh God." I was like, "But can't you tell? You already know." And you said, "You already know, like,
Right.
you created me, you know my desires."
Yeah.
And so to hear that voice of, even though he knows, he still wants us to ask,
Yeah.
and it's so hard to get in that mindset sometimes because we can go on autopilot. Like, I
Yeah.
got this to-do list today, I got 10 items, I'm just gonna rush through it. And, but then for me, sometimes doing that without putting him first, I still feel so unfulfilled,
Mm.
and or I feel more anxious. I'm so anxious because there's so much that needs to get done.
Mm.
And then it's like, but what would it be like if I went to him in the morning and said, God, guide my day?
Mm.
What would that 10 list look like? I'm pretty sure it will change. And so
Yeah.
recently I started to say, okay, God, help me to guide my day and give me the things that are going to be the most impactful for that day,
Yeah. Yeah.
because there's so much to get done.
Yeah. There always is.
Yeah. And I was telling my mom the other day, I was like, I feel like the little hamster on the wheel, just going and going and going, but you don't have anything to show for it in my
Yeah.
mindset.
Right. Right. I was telling my husband the other day, I like was on like a rollout like with my personal work, and I was working and I was working, and I walked in and out into the kitchen, and Sweet Thing made dinner for me and all
Oh,
that stuff. And I walked out, I'm like, okay, I'm finally finished with work. I'm like, I'm at a stopping point with the work. I'm
mhm,
not finished with it
mhm.
by any means, but I'm at a place where I can stop for the day.
Yeah.
So yes, there's always something to do. So how do you check yourself when it comes to like, especially running your own business,
Mhm.
like doing just like a self inventory of like, one, you're the person in charge. So
Yes.
like the line stops with you, but
Right.
also like there's always going to be something to do.
Exactly. And I will say that has been my journey for years,
Yeah.
learning to rest in him. And so we're always having that conversation. Girl, when you gonna sit down and just rest and let me get things done?
Yeah.
And in April, I ended up getting sick, and I
Mm.
thought that I had COVID, and I thought I had pneumonia. It was some respiratory bug that just took me out, and for 2 weeks, as I was sick, there was things I just couldn't do because I wasn't feeling well, but that's when I saw God doing things with the nonprofit, like doors just start opening up, and I was like, "Oh, so basically you telling me I'm in your way." And so you had to sit me down,
All right.
get me
Yeah.
sick, so you can start opening up the doors, because my innate nature is to work. And he
Yeah.
tells me all the time, "Come here, you can't work your miracle." And
Mm.
so, so how do I check myself? I got sick. And it's like,
Right.
I try not to get to that extreme, but sometimes because I get so fixated, God will provide interruptions to kind of get me back on track.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm in tune enough where I can stop myself, but it depends on what my priorities are at that time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I can definitely understand that because I am surrounded by people who, not to call you stubborn, but might be a little bit stubborn about God's lessons. And
Mm,
like you have to like be bedbound for 2 weeks in order for you to like completely understand it and just like watch God move.
yeah,
Um Me and my
yeah,
husband just went through something similar where I'm like, "Oh, and God just wanted to tell you, like, you learn lessons the hard way. Like, this is how
exactly.
you learn lessons. So this is where we're at." Like,
Yeah. Yeah, because even while I was sick, because initially I thought I just had a cold, so I
yeah.
had prepared to be out for 5 days, but it
Mm.
just kept going. And so it's like, "Are you listening?" And I'm like, "No." "Okay, well,
Are
keep
you
going.
there yet? Like,
Keep
knock,
going."
knock. Right. Right. Exactly. And I always think too, like, I'm actually, ironically enough, I'm doing a series about rest right now and like
Mm,
the different types of rest. And
yes.
like I think, I mean, I didn't realize this up until maybe a few years ago, but like there's different types of rest and we need to
Mhm.
be providing rest for our whole selves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we just think rest is like binge watching Netflix and sleeping until noon, like cool, but really, like, that will only maybe fix, physical and mental rest. But what if your rest needs to be social or emotional or
Yeah.
spiritual? Like,
Mhm.
which rest do you need? And if you're feeling drained after your rest, you're probably not getting the right type.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, for sure. And even for me, where my lesson comes in the most is sleep rest.
Mm,
Because of the to-do list. I gotta get this done. And
mm,
someone reminded me that when you're not sleeping, you're not giving your body the opportunity to recover,
yeah,
and you don't make up that time. Like, your body never fully recovers what you deprived it of.
yeah,
Because you will think, "Okay, well, Saturday, I'll just sleep in." And that's a myth. Like, you still didn't get what your body need to fully function.
hmm,
And then another thing that a friend really encouraged me with and wanted me to have the visual is that when you're sleeping, God is working.
mm,
So why not take a break? Let
yeah,
him keep working
yeah,
instead
and
of thinking that it's all on me. It's like, no,
yeah,
he's
oh
doing his
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I heard something said about the Sabbath in the same regard as like, do you think you're so like as a gut check of like, do you think you're so important that the world is going to stop if you're not in it for a day? Like that's not the truth. Like ego check, like,
Yeah.
the world can exist without you for a day, so take it off because God told us to.
Yeah, for sure. And yet we're having this conversation because it's so challenging to do it.
Yes, yes, exactly. It is tough to do it, and it also I think it's really fun. I mean, I love when like science is like scratching its head at like mysteries that like God created,
Oh,
and sleep is one of them. I have done a lot of research into sleep, and there are people who do it professionally, and they're like, why do we need like this, like, why is our bodies hardwired for this chunk of time?
mhm.
I think it's like a third of your life spent asleep.
Yeah.
Like, why have our bodies evolved to that point? When really, I'm like, I think there's like a divine reason for it. I don't have the answer for it, but I think there's a divine reason that God created us to need sleep,
Yeah.
and we just like don't know it, or at least science doesn't know it.
Sure. Yeah, they'll give you some ideas, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you what happens if you don't sleep.
Mhm.
Like, there's a lot of things that happen when you don't sleep, but, like, stuff especially around, like, dreams and your brain and, like,
Mhm.
why we don't what the why we need sleep is only in the side effects and the symptoms of
Mhm.
not sleeping. It's not in the actual, like, core of why we actually need sleep as humans.
Right. Yeah.
Anyways, that's my aside. I'm like looking at my book right now and I just did
Yeah,
a video about it. And it's called Why We Sleep.
yeah.
And
And
it's all the
because
stuff of
as you were
what
saying it,
happens.
I'm like, one of the things that's so clear is that you like to learn.
Oh yeah. I
Uh-huh.
mean, this bookshelf, and then also the other day I like had a mini meltdown because we moved in here like a year and a half ago, and like there are still boxes in closets. Like
Yeah,
that's real life.
yeah,
And I was looking for a specific book and I couldn't find it anywhere. And just like this one book I haven't picked up in years, couldn't find it anywhere. And I'm like, where's this book, running around my house? So yeah, definitely a bookworm reader learner.
yeah.
All right, let's kind of bring it back, bring it around. You've kind of hinted at it, but I want you to go a little bit more in depth of what kind of does your day look like when it comes to rising, being with God, and then like family? Do you have kids? I don't have kids,
I
so
I don't have children, which is a
okay. Okay. Are you married?
I'm not married. Mm-mm.
Okay. So you are taking care of yourself and
Yes.
like
So I have the least amount of distractions.
but also like I think it's a little bit easier to like get away with not doing stuff when you're like
Mm.
alone. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah, you
but
have I think in general, you have to be deliberate.
yeah.
And that was one of the things why I like Paul, because no matter what, he was very
Mm,
deliberate in everything that he did. But for me, in terms of my morning routine, which I know those who are married and have children, this is probably not possible for them because of
right.
time and commitments. But for myself, about 2 years ago, we was reading a book together as our church fellowship, and one of the things that he talked about was as soon as you wake up in the morning, drop to your knees and pray,
Mm,
even before you go to the restroom. So for the past 2 years, that's been my routine. I get
mm.
up and I drop and I pray. And it's just 5 minutes. It's not my full prayer because I still do have to go to the restroom.
Yes, and you need a coffee if you could drink coffee or tea or
Yeah,
a
yeah.
morning
I still
beverage.
need to wake up. But that has been really insightful because I'm acknowledging him, and I'm because you I think you might have received text or quotes about um having God first thing in the morning. Well,
Mhm.
I can say yes, I do.
Yeah.
And then after that, in the restroom break, I have the privilege of being able to sit and study God's word. And
Mm,
so my quiet times is usually about 30 to 45 minutes and just digging and allowing him to speak into me. But I will say I get in trouble at times because I will break that to do email or internet stuff so I can post things about the organization.
mhm.
And then, of course, when I do that, I'm so disgusted at myself. Like, it's supposed to be your time with God. You allow these distractions to come in. Why are you going on social media first?
Right.
And so it still is a level of discipline.
Yeah.
Because if it's not in a sense of me making the effort, I will make the effort to do something else, and it
Mm,
happens very quickly and easily. And so, but when I'm at home with my family, I don't have that luxury. I don't have the luxury of having this quiet space for 30 to 45 minutes. I don't have the luxury to get out the bed and pray on my knees first thing in the morning. And so when I'm in that context, when things are, you have family to take care of,
right.
um, I have to make sure that I'm praying throughout the day. I have to make sure that I find, 5, 10, 15 minutes where I can read a psalm and be refreshed in my spirit, where I'm able to, I'll just find that little time, that nugget for me so that God can calm my spirit. And so it took me a moment because I will feel guilty. I'm like, oh, but normally you're like at 45 minutes and now this is like 10 and 5.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn how to be creative in seeking him throughout the day and even repeating scriptures
Mm,
throughout the day so that I'm still being reminded of his word, or even if I'm doing a chore or if I have to drive somewhere where I put something on immediately that's sharing about him, just
Mhm.
to reconnect my spirit,
Yeah.
because living is there and it's legit and it just happens. And for those mothers who have small kids, it's like it's nearly impossible, even going to the restroom there at the door. You're
Right.
like, "Did I just go to the bathroom?" You're like, "Oh," and then you try to lock the
Yeah.
door and you hear him chugging. You're like, "Oh my goodness." And so you have to be more creative to have that union with him.
Yeah.
But I know that if I am not deliberate in that level of distraction or family environment, then at some point it will come out. Someone be like, "Kemir, you're being real short to me." I'm like, "No, I'm not." He's like, "Yes, you
Yeah.
are." Or like I said before, just thinking about me. "Oh, you did this wrong," and da da da.
Right.
And it's because I haven't had that time with him.
Mm.
And so when someone checks me from my character shortness, then I know, girl, you need to go spend your time, go outside, walk around the house, even if it's for 5 minutes, cry out, to do something where you communion with him.
Yeah. And I think too, like you even touched on something that I haven't considered before of like that guilt of like not spending enough time with God. At that, like when you have that guilt or just I guess maybe that conviction,
Yeah.
right? It's making it about you too. Right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's like I feel bad cuz I didn't do this, but then like we're able to I think if we reframe that into like what you were saying earlier is like God wants to be spending this time with us.
Yeah, yeah, and because even if you don't reframe it and you stay in that mindset, what happens is you feel so guilty and it just keeps continuing to the point that you just give up
Mhm.
altogether.
Yeah.
Because now you just feel so poorly about yourself, and then it reflects in other things that you do throughout the day. And so I definitely gone down that path many times and had to reevaluate and seek deliverance with, um even if I think about him in a given moment, oh, that's actually really good because
Mhm.
we can go on autopilot and just do all those things. But if even if we allow ourselves to pause in our day and think about him, and even say in that thought, "God, I just love you."
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he want to hear that? Like,
Yeah.
"Oh, my daughter loves me. Look at her.
Yeah.
She's pausing just to tell me that she loves me today."
Yeah. For sure. And when you mentioned kids on the bathroom door, it just took me back to this funny video that I wish I could share. But it's my nephew and my brother-in-law is in the shower and my
Mhm.
nephew is literally on the floor looking underneath the door frame like, Dada, like he's like a one and a half, Dada, Dada. And you
Yeah.
just hear him talking back and forth. And my sister took a video of it. And I was just like, that's so funny because it is like really true. Like I don't have kids either, but yeah, it is true that they are literally at the bathroom waiting for you.
Just looking for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
And
one thing too of like that just sticks out to me is just doing that little bit. I fall into that trap, especially when it comes to like working out. The
mhm.
days where I'm like, I got nothing, like I have nothing in the tank. And I just go, okay, just go try to do as much as you can in the
Yeah,
gym. And then that's going to be enough for today. And,
yeah.
and and whatever I end up doing, or when I'm actually working out, if I'm like, I am just beat and I can't continue any longer. I'll look, okay, I got 15 minutes in. 15 minutes is better than nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And then for those who don't have those distractions and do have the opportunity to invest in that time, I've learned for myself that I'm better equipped to meet my challenges if I spend that time with God in the morning so that He's guiding me throughout the day. Because there was
Mhm.
one period where I was like, I'll do it at nighttime.
Mhm.
And then what happens at nighttime? You're tired. You can't
Yeah.
really grab hold of anything, and you don't have anything to refer to
Yeah.
because the day is over in terms of pulling you out of circumstances.
Right.
Yeah. And so after my Bible time, I go exercise. And then after that, I start working.
Yeah. And then the grind starts. I
Yes.
the other thing too that stood out to me is the discipline. In in all of these conversations I'm having, especially on this podcast, I'm realizing that there is, I mean, an intended or unintended kind of uh stereotype that Christians don't have to be disciplined
Oh,
in their faith, or
oh,
like they don't have to schedule out their faith. Almost
would that
every
be
person
lovely?
right, every person I've talked to, almost every person I've talked to on this podcast has talked about how they schedule out time and they are disciplined in their time with God. And I think that I don't want to normalize that and normalize the it's okay if it doesn't feel naturally. If it doesn't naturally come about. It's okay if it doesn't, because guess what? That's just the world that you're living in right now.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that stems from God being invisible.
Mm,
If he was in a physical representation and you had access to him physically throughout the day, it wouldn't be any different than your people relationships. Where
right.
for you being married, like you want to spend, sometimes you want to spend time with your husband, sometimes you need a break from him. But generally,
Both.
yes,
Most of the time I want to spend time with him. Yes.
right. But you stay together because there's things that you really appreciate about him, and he brings things in your life. And so you have something tangible and physical to draw you back to him. And if he wasn't physically there, after a while, you will miss him and you will feel
Mhm.
like something is missing in your life. And so, because God is invisible, we don't have that physical connection, that physical reminder, that physical, like, I will do anything for you. And so that's why it comes to, okay, it requires discipline
Mhm.
because I'm having this relationship with someone that I can't physically see, even though at times you will physically have his awareness and how he's orchestrating things in your life. And
Right.
then you get even excited because you're like, he's real. I can tell he did this. Da, da, da. But
Right.
without those little kisses, as I call them, we can be
That's
oblivious.
beautiful. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I love that.
we can be oblivious to him working behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I think too, oh my god, like I'm a little choked up because that was so beautiful. Just God's little kisses. I think when we look at other religions or ways of thought, too, what you see is that attempt to grasp at
Hmm.
the physical.
Hmm. Yeah.
You think of, like, even, like, having statues, and even in
Hmm.
Christian history, right? Like, there
Yeah.
was, like, this whole, uproar if, like, Jesus should be in a picture or not, right? Like, there was the whole controversy around that, but when you look at a lot of other religions, a lot of them, either if there's, like, a city that they're supposed to go to because it's extra sacred,
Hmm.
or that's how they can access God, or even like having a statue or some kind of idol, or what have you. Even like, if you I'm going to make some people mad about this, but like with the new age stuff, you have like crystals, and you
Hmm.
have, things like that in the world where people are just like trying to grasp onto something. And I think that's
Hmm.
like a really good point, is like we're just, I think a lot of them are trying to make sense of the
Yeah.
world that God has given us.
Yeah. Yeah, because we need something visual to connect with. And
Yeah.
God's answer for that, because we know that people got in trouble with the idols, and he was like, hey, that's not me. And his answer was, if you want to remember me, just write my word everywhere in your
Mm-hmm.
house.
Yeah.
He's like, that's how you remember me, because there's truth
Yeah.
in that word. And as you hold on to that truth, you're actually holding on to me.
Yeah. And also like communion and
Mm-hmm.
taking in, the bread and the cup, like that. Do this in remembrance of me,
Right.
like,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That's how. And I think too, like, one thing that I've really been leaning into, I'd say, like, over the past few months, is really looking at not artwork that I idolize, but
Mm-hmm.
more so like artwork and things of beauty and things of creativity that just remind me of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when I'm in my space, I'm able to look at that and be like, oh, like, That's
Mm-hmm.
that's God's presence in
Yeah.
my life, not the actual thing, but it is the reminder. It's like a Post-it note. The Post-it note's not the actual thing that you have to do. It's the reminder of the thing you have to do.
Right. Wouldn't it be great if Post-it could actually do the work?
Right? I feel like that's gonna be like coming down the work like
Over with the
it's
AI
a
stuff.
AI company. Oh my gosh,
Yes.
I'm gonna give you a sneak peek. I was just working on this social post before we had this, and I was on a call with this group that I'm a part of called the Writer's Block. And the gal who's speaking this week, she said, AI is not the Imago Dei. And I was like, oh, yes, like full body chills in the best way. Like AI is not the Imago Dei. In so much so, like we were talking about writing and AI is gonna take our jobs and everything. But it was like, no, like we are made in the image of God. And when we write, we are able to reflect that too.
For
So
sure. Yeah.
all the beautiful things. Well, Kemir, this conversation has been so good, and I can't wait to like look back over the transcript of this and just like
Mhm.
write down all the little things like God's kisses. I'm saving that one. That's going to go on my whiteboard next to me. But one question I always like to end with is, what is a tangible faith discipline that someone can enact in their life this week to help grow their faith?
Yes. And so I chuckle because living by myself, it's easy for me to talk to myself. They say you don't
Yeah.
do it, but we all know we do it,
Oh,
right?
everyone does, yeah.
And so in this context, instead of being told you can't do it, just talk to God throughout the
Mm,
day. And as I shared earlier, even in that 5 minutes or that one or that 30-second, 10-second, just even say, God, I love you today.
mm,
And as you do that, allowing yourself to connect to his spirit, so that as you continue throughout the rest of your day, you're not just on autopilot. There's an awareness that he's
mm.
with you, and there's an awareness that you are drawing close to him, even when the chaos is not possible.
Love that. I'm not gonna add anything else. We're gonna end on that. Thank you so much, Kemir. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you, if they want to see the curriculum that you're putting out there? Tell us all the things.
Yes. So even though the name of the company is really long, we are known as J Intel. So if you go to our website, jintel.org, you can learn more about myself, our story, how we came about, the services that we offer. And we also have on there just articles to continue on your terms of your emotional wellness and just learning and gaining insight. And then,
Love
of
that.
course, we're on Facebook. So on Facebook, we're jintel.org.
There we go. There we go. And I'll also add it in the show notes so people can find it with complete
Yes,
ease.
because I'm
Thank
I'm
you so
creating new
much.
names. I'm creating new names.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll catch you guys next week on the pod.
Have a good one.
Bye.